the simplicity complexity problem. A lot of what scientists have to say is pretty complex, and not everyone understands that level of complexity. So what do we do about that? Well, there was an article in the New York Times that I thought would help clarify for me what we should do about that. Let me open it up here. There we go. Are you confused by scientific jargon? So are scientists. So it's a article that tries to address this entire simplicity complexity dynamic, like diagnosing what the problem is, how bad of a problem it is, what the repercussions are. And I was hoping it would have some answers as to what to do about it, but instead, by the end of it, I just kind of got more confused, which is not great. So we are going to go through this, try to analyze it, and see if we can find some answers. And I believe, looking at chat, I kind of recognize a name or two here. So I'm hoping some of you scientists out there will maybe give me a little bit of insight as to why there's a weird kind of conflict in this article that seems to be a little unresolved and what we can do about it. Now, as you'll notice, being the narrative nerd I am, I also color-coded each force of narrative in this article. Blue is the force of agreement, those sentences that are there to give us context. Red is every time that there's a contradiction about what, like kind of turning the story from what was just set up or some kind of problem. And whenever you see green, that is some sort of action. And as we go through, or action or consequence or result. And as you go through, I want you to see how well or how poorly these colors are balanced. Ideally, you want it to be constantly mixing through these colors until a certain point. Then at a certain point, if you do a really good job, like giving us the problems and giving us the context, then you can go green for a while. Then you can like really lay out your case. Okay, here's what we need to do about it. Here's the therefore. Here's the consequence. So read this article, see if they do a good job or not. So here we go. Are you confused by scientific jargon? So are scientists. Scientific papers containing lots of specialized terminology are less likely to be cited by other researchers. Okay, so we already kind of got a sense of what this is going to be about. And I'm sure, looking at this next sentence, I'm just going to nail all these pronunciations. If you are a cave scientist or researcher, I'm sure you'll be quite happy. Polje, nappy, vugi, samite. I think I nailed it. Some scientists who study caves might not bat an eye, but for the rest of us, these terms might as well be ancient Greek. I don't know what you're talking about. I was fine with all of them. Specialized terminology isn't unique to the ivory tower. Just ask a baker about torting or an arborist about bracts, for example. But it's pervasive in academia. And now a team of researchers has analyzed jargon in a set of 21,000 scientific manuscripts. They found that papers containing higher proportions of jargon in their titles and abstracts were cited less frequently by other researchers. Science communication with the public, but also among scientists, suffers when a research paper is packed with too much specialized terminology, the team concluded. These results were published Wednesday in Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Jargon can be a problem. Okay, that's a pretty neutral agreement statement. Nothing too contradictory about that, so I coded it blue. But it also serves a purpose, said Hilary Schulman, a communication scientist at Ohio State University. As our ideas become more refined, it makes sense that our concepts do too. This language within a language can be a time saver, a way to precisely convey meaning, she said. However, it also runs the risk of starkly reminding people, even some well-educated researchers, that they aren't in the know. It's alienating, said Dr. Schulman. All right, got a big swath of green here, but like I said, I'm not going to mind this too much because I think they did a really good job laying out the case, so what are we going to do about it? Let's hear the consequences. Two scientists recently investigated how the use of jargon affects a manuscript's likelihood of being cited in other scientific journals. Such citations are an acknowledgement of a study's importance and relevance, and they're used to estimate a researcher's productivity. All right, laying out the stakes pretty clearly as to why this is important. Alejandro Martinez, an evolutionary biologist, and Stefano Mamola, an ecologist, both at the National Research Council in Palanza, Italy, started by collecting scientific papers. Using the Web of Science, an online platform that allows subscribers to access databases of scholarly publications, they zeroed in on 21,486 manuscripts focused on cave research. Over 21,000 manuscripts just about cave research. I love humans. I love our fixations and our fascinations. Cave science is a particularly jargon-heavy field, Dr. Martinez said. That's because it attracts a diverse pool of researchers, each of whom brings their own terminology. This could actually probably be blue instead of green. Anthropologists, geologists, zoologists, and ecologists all end up meeting in caves, he said. They like the rocks or the bugs or the human remains or the wall paintings. Yeah, I think I miscolored this. Let's fix that right now. This seems pretty context heavy to me. Just kind of like setting up the next part. Okay, cool. To compile a list of cave-related jargon words, this is the action, this is what they're doing, so this would be green. Dr. Martinez combed over the glossaries of caving books and review studies. He settled on roughly 1,500 terms, including the 4 that appear at the beginning of this article. Sorry if I'm stuttering a little bit extra today for reading this. I'm actually sick, but I am pushing through because the show must go on. All right. Focusing up. Dr. Mamola then wrote a computer program to calculate the proportion of jargon words in each manuscript's title and abstract. Papers with a higher fraction of jargon received fewer citations, the researchers found. Not surprising. And none of the most highly cited papers, with more than 450 citations, wow, used jargon in their title, while almost all the abstracts where fewer than 1% of the words were jargon. Okay. So it seems pretty clear what the answer is. Less jargon. Scientists use less jargon. Use simpler words. All right. As citations are often viewed as a metric of academic success, jargon has a negative effect on a paper. This is like conclusion stuff, so this would be green. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Mamola propose. Fewer citations can mean that a paper isn't getting read and remembered, which is bad news for science communication overall, the team concluded. Okay, well, it seems like we have our answer. This seems like we have our need. We have our what we need. We have our full narrative. This all makes sense, right? Here's where things start to go off the rails for me. But other researchers, however, have found, however, that using less common words, a form of jargon, can be beneficial. What? So we're not supposed to use jargon? We're not supposed to use less common words, but we are supposed to use jargon? We are supposed to use less common words? Maybe this will get clearer. David Markowitz, a psychology of language researcher at the University of Oregon, analyzed the abstracts of nearly 20,000 proposals, another big sample size for funding, from the National Science Foundation. His results, published in 2019, revealed that abstracts that contained fewer common words tended to garner more grant funding. Jargon doesn't always associate with negative outcomes, Dr. Markowitz said. But clear communication should always be a goal in science, said Sabine Stanley, a planetary scientist at Johns Hopkins University. It's important to step back and always remind yourself as a scientist, how do I describe what I'm doing to someone who's not doing this 24/7 like I am? But you just said that there are some people that you can like target with a lot of jargon words who aren't doing this 24/7 like you are, who you'll get more grant money from. Okay. Dr. Stanley recently participated in the UpGore 5 Challenge at the annual meeting of the American Geophysical Union, inspired by an XKCD comic explaining the Saturn V rocket in plain language by Randall Munroe, an occasional Times contributor. The event challenges participants to communicate their science using only the 1,000 most common words in the English language. A text editor is available, of course. It's quite challenging, said Dr. Stanley, who presented new results from the Mars InSight lander. The title of her talk? A space computer named InSight landed on the red world last year, and here is what we found so far. Okay. So this is a conundrum. Obviously, according to this article, scientists need to communicate clearly, succinctly, and with very little jargon, using common words that are easily understood by everyone. And scientists also have to use a lot of jargon words, a lot of complicated words, a lot of very inner circle speech and dialogue in order to communicate clearly and get their grants funded. What? So, whenever something like this happens, I have kind of fallen into a new habit of trying to figure out where the gaps in the narrative are. What is it that they're trying to tell us? Or what is it that they haven't told us? What is it that they've told us narratively? But also, where are the gaps? And can we logically fill in those gaps? Now, if there's any scientists or researchers listening right now, I'd appreciate your insights as to why in one case it really, really works well to be simple, not use jargon, and why in another case you need a lot of jargon. But let's try to puzzle through this in the meantime. So here is what we're going to start with. Blank and blank, but blank, because blank, therefore blank, by blank. We're going to start off with a very general kind of sentence that just kind of sets the stage. Knowing how to communicate effectively is important for scientists. Nice general. This is kind of what it's all about at the most general, broad terms. So I think that's good enough. Let's just put that to the side for right now. All right. Is there a heaven in this? I think there is. And well, let's just kind of go in order. Let's get the first narrative. This kind of feels like two narratives. Let's get the first narrative out of the way. And so the first is about citations. It's about getting cited, the 21,000 manuscripts they looked at. Okay. And if scientists communicate simply in their abstracts by not using jargon and focusing on common words, then they will get cited more, which leads to all these like accolades they get. Like the article said, it laid out the stakes pretty well. Where was that? Yeah, less frequently cited. Anyway, getting cited is important for scientists for their papers. All right, so we've established this baseline Earth. We have this heaven. So if we do this thing, if we communicate simply, if we don't use jargon, hey, then we will get cited a lot more. But, all right, simple statement, but that's not the case with, this is about grant proposals, isn't it? The second one. Okay. Did they conflate apples and oranges in this? I think they did. But that's not the case with proposal writing, where more jargon equals more funding. Because why is it? I think this is what the article left out. I think it's this because. And I'm not sure how clear they were on the last, like, therefore, by. I guess they kind of had, where was it? It's important to step back and always remind yourself as a scientist, how do I describe what I'm doing? All right. Therefore, we need to correctly communicate. This is a good one. All right, so to my scientists who are listening, I think this is the problem. Let me try to work through this with you. All right, I think we might be talking about, no, not that one. There we go. I think we might be talking about two audiences here, an inner circle and an outer circle audience. I think for the NSF proposals, because correct me if I'm wrong, NSF proposal reviewers are going to only review proposals that are in the same discipline as they are, or very, very, very close, like right next door, basically. Like they want someone who's like dead on or so close. And if that's the case, then the NSF proposal reviewers are more in here. They're going to be more inner circle. They're going to be more at ease with jargon words, with jargon language, jargon terminology, complicated concepts, longer abstracts. They're going to want more details. They're going to want more details. Whereas the outer circle, whereas for just publishing your research paper to the wide world, that's going to be like people who are in very closely related disciplines to people who are kind of next door to people who might be a little bit farther away. You're hitting this like much bigger article, whereas if for like a research paper, you're using a lot of jargon, then you're just hitting this inner circle. So it's audience dependent. That's what this article should have said, that whether you use simplicity or complexity in your writing is audience dependent. Because of course it is. Okay. Man. Okay. So, then, but that's not the case with proposal writing. I said I'm sick today, so it's going to be a lot of weird typos and grammatical errors. But that's not the case with proposal writing, where more jargon equals more funding because NSF, let's get really specific here, NSF reviewers. I am right about that, right? Chat, Google, what do you say? Yes. All right. The National Science Foundation uses reviewers from related disciplines to help select proposals for funding. They're inner circle. Reviewers are typically scientists, engineers, mathematicians, blah, 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 selected based on the knowledge of the science and engineering fields, infrastructure, encouraged to provide demographic information. Okay. So, yes, they are in the same fields. They are inner circle. So, of course, you would want to use more jargon for them because they are inner circle and they'd understand. They don't need all the extra context that outer circle people have. Okay, because NSF reviewers are inner... Let's see. But that's not the case with proposal writing, where more jargon equals more funding, because NSF reviewers are inner circle audience and respond positively to the extra complexity. Therefore, we need to correctly communicate by identifying the nature of the audience and what level of simplicity versus complexity they require. So, know your audience. Are you dealing with inner circle or are you dealing with outer circle? That kind of determines what level of complexity you are allowed to have. Mystery solved, everyone. We did it. We did it. Okay. So this kind of speaks to what I've been using the ABT tool for more and more lately. When trying to communicate or trying to understand what other people are communicating to me, it works as a logic tool, a focusing tool to figure out, okay, what's being said? What are they forgetting to say that I need to know? Where are the holes in their logic? Where are the holes in their narrative? Can I fill them in? Can they fill them in? Like this is certainly a case where, like, if I'm right, and I think this is probably right, this is a case where it goes back to a saying that we have in our training, like, all the time. Where does the burden of responsibility for communication lie? Does it lie with the speaker, with the communicator, to speak or communicate clearly? Or does it lie with the audience to figure out the mumbled mess that the communicator is throwing at them? Where does the burden lie? Communicator or audience? They did a pretty good job in this article, but ultimately they left it to us to connect the last few dots.